Okay, here we are on day 15, and lots has changed. Okay, so first of all, my baby tank is now overrun with Thalassiosira westflegliae, or basically green diatoms. I don't actually know for a fact that that's the subspecies. That's the species of diatom it is. I'm just assuming it is because this tank was inoculated with the TW1800 solution, and we're assuming that some of the TW1800 solution was alive. Therefore, it would be Thalassiosira westflegliae, and now it has since continued to breed. It's worth noting that in order to breed diatoms effectively, you basically need plant fertilizer and sodium silicate, which is something used in pottery to give it a cracked effect. But it's also very helpful because it's just raw mineral silicate, which is something that diatoms need to bloom. So if we want the diatoms to outcompete the other forms of algae, the best way to do that is to give them sodium silicate to allow them to outcompete the other algae. So we're assuming that's why we have such an insane flush. We're introducing nitrates from the rotifer tank, nitrates from whatever TW1800 rotted in here, and then, there's other stuff from my other fish tanks that's ending up in here too, like from the various transfers I'm doing, and that's also introducing nitrates. So we've got our nitrates, we got our sodium silicate, and now we have a diatom bloom in here, which is great. I have no problem with a diatom bloom being in my baby tank. However, it is getting darker every day, and so we're assuming that sooner or later it's going to be too dark to see in there, and then that's too much. Therefore, I want to add a bunch of rotifers to eat up the diatom bloom. Now, it's also worth noting that this might not be diatoms. There's a very good chance that this is actually a bacterial bloom, because you can see it's actually more cloudy than it is green. And if that's the case, there's a very good chance that I actually have a bacterial bloom, not a diatom bloom, which is less preferable than a diatom bloom for sure. To be honest with you, I don't actually know the chemistry reason why of that. We're all assuming that diatoms give off better excretes than bacteria do, but I haven't actually investigated that, so that might not be true. I think we all just fear bacteria more inherently because of all bacterial associations, and algae is considered mostly harmless. But in fact, in the case of a fish tank, probably either one of those things could end up crashing your system, bacteria or diatoms, if they overpopulate and crash. Either way, if it's bacteria or diatoms, if it's diatoms, the rotifers can definitely eat it. And if it's bacteria, the vast majority of bacteria can be eaten by rotifers. That's based on size, not based on ecology. Just, rotifers should be able to eat pretty much all bacteria based on size. Though some bacteria might be bad for rotifers or might behave as pathogens to rotifers, we're going to assume that this is just normal aquarium bacteria and not, rotifer infection bacteria. And therefore, we want to bring the bacteria level down in here and actually feed this bacteria to the rotifers. So here's my plan. You guys might recall this coconut oil container. And if we just look at it straight up, you can see that the rotifer colony is massively collapsed here. There is easily 10% of what there used to be. When we used to look at this before, we would see moving things everywhere. Now, if you look, like you can see moving things, but we're not overwhelmed by it. So we know actually that this doesn't have as many rotifers as we need. If this thing had as many rotifers as it had on day 10 and 11, then this would be great. I could basically dump this whole thing in here, and those rotifers would clean up this whole tank, and they'd bloom in there. So it'd be a win-win. I'd get extra rotifers, which I could then culture again, and I would knock down the bacterial bloom. However, this tank has had a rotifer crash in it, so there are rotifers, but not nearly the population we had before. So I don't actually think there's enough rotifer density in here to actually do damage here. All the same, I don't really want to take my aquarium water, my bacterial aquarium water, and put it in my clean rotifer cultures, because as you may recall, we think this one might have been contaminated by brine shrimp, but we know that this one, and this one have been fairly well behaved. So essentially, I don't want to put the bacterial water in my 3 good cultures. Therefore, the decision is to take 80% of this water and dump it in here and hope that the rotifers that are in here bloom in this tank and eat up all the bacteria. And then I'm going to turkey baster water out of here back into this tank and fill this tank up with the cloudy water. The hope is that the majority of the rotifers that are in here end up in here and clean up this tank and then bloom in this tank. And then any of the rotifers that manage to hang out on the bottom, when I transfer, we're going to give them a whole fresh new empty culture container filled with living bacteria or diatoms that they can eat. And hopefully we'll get a second life out of this culture while we continue to let the rest of the cultures bloom. I do suspect I'm still going to need to steal rotifers out of some of these other containers and put them in my main tank in order to get it cleared up. But the games begin now, right? We're finally at the point where we're not just building stuff and we're actually working with stuff. So let's see how it goes. Now, as you guys know, before we do our transfer, there is always a mandatory viewing window to see how the rotifers in the culture are doing. So let's just have a little look and see how our little friends are doing. So there they are. So that's good, right? We can see that there are rotifers in our coconut oil jar number 2. I would love to see them moving in that typical jerky fashion that we know living rotifers show. Oh yeah, but I just saw one change directions there. You can see that guy in the middle moving back and forth up and down it. So we can safely say there is a rotifer population. No, I mean, yeah, it's way down. You remember how many there used to be in here. And now, basically, we can count them, right? We can count how many rotifers there are, whereas before it was totally out of control and there was no chance of counting it. So that's a good sense, right? We might be 10 times down, we might be 100 times down in our population. But anyways, now that we have that context, we can move them over. I'm going to put a light on this tank as well, just to see if we see any rotifers drifting around in here, but I don't think there are. Yeah, I don't see any. So I'll do videos on this tank some other time, perhaps. But for now, let's do the swap. Actually, sorry, before doing the swap, I think we are required to just double check the salinity levels. I'm really not happy putting this culture water on my fairly new refractometer, but we gotta know the salinity because the big tank is sitting at 1.023 and I'm aiming for 1.021 specific gravity, and so I need to add water to the big one now, and so I need to know what this one's at before we can move forward. All right, and it's at 1.023, maybe 1.024. Yeah, as well. So they're basically matching, so that's good news. So that means I can basically dump this into here, but like yuck. I didn't want that on there. But so I can dump this into here, but I think when I put this back into there, no, that doesn't work either. Yeah, so what I'm going to have to do is dump this 80% into here. There's not even enough space in here for that, so I need to take some water out of here, dump this 80% into here, so I can take 1 gallon out of here, get us down to here. Then I can put 80% of this back in, which is 0.25 gallons. Then I'm going to fill up the rest with fresh water through a drip, and that'll get us down to about 1.022-ish. And then it's like 1.0215, hopefully. And then that gallon I don't want to waste, not only because this is rotifer feed, but also because I'm trying to not spend a bunch of money on salt water. I'm going to put a third of that gallon back in here. I'm going to put a little bit of it back into here, even though I didn't want to really damage this culture. I just think it's valuable. So I'm going to put that back in here because I want to be able to see what's going on. And then we'll probably just rotate back and forth water in these guys as we build up rotifers, and then either use them with hopefully coming babies, or just, grow our rotifer culture. Maybe put them in that big green thing. Okay. With that all being said, we can do this now, but it's going to take me a while. Okay. I've decided, because it's going to take me such a long time to get organized for this, that I need to just dump 10% in now. So that's what I'm going to do. By the way, it was pouring this in that might have triggered the bacterial bloom in the first place. And yes, I have checked if the cloudiness is rotifers, and it does not. Okay. But yeah, guys, I really blew it with this tank, because we had a really, really nice culture, and now we're down to maybe 3% of what that culture was. Just total estimate, but it used to be a really, really, really flush culture in here, you guys remember, and now it's pretty dissolved. There's maybe a couple hundred rotifers in that gallon. So rise and fall, right? Rise and fall of the culture. At least there's some still alive in there, and it didn't get contaminated. But exactly when I needed this culture full, it's empty. And isn't that a funny game? Now, I could steal from these other guys, but I'm not going to do that. They're we want to keep growing our culture. We already learned that lesson. Though, we also know that we need to expand. We need to expand these water volumes ASAP. Alas, it is day 22, and it is time. So, the plan is, take as much water out of here as I can manage without taking a bunch of rotifers out. Take that, what we'll call white water. Take that white water, and we're going to put as much of it as possible into this very tall glass jar right here, which I'm guessing is about 3 liters. I'm gonna basically take 3 liters out of here and put it in here. Then we'll take maybe down to there and dump it in here to try and get as many rotifers in here as possible. And then we will refill this back into here all the way back up. I do think in the future I will put some of this water in here and here, and we'll try and keep the original tank pure. Because I think this is great rotifer food. It's live bacteria. Like, that should be great rotifer food. So yeah, if the rotifers bloom in here, that'll set me forward 3 or 4 weeks, right? That would be 10 gallons of rotifers, which would be wonderful, and would be more than enough to have more than enough rotifers, right? Plus this 5-gallon jar. and then from there I can split them or yeah, use them. So that's the plan. So yeah, I'll be back when I have carefully pulled out all those liters of white water. Oh, also, I do want to just take a moment before we cover everything in green water and it's no longer visible to actually do the zoom in, because we haven't done that in a few days. So turn off the bubbler. Again, by the way, I keep forgetting to to turn the bubbler off. And so once again, or turn the bubbler back on after turning it off. So once again, the bubbler was off in all of these for a few hours. It's not ideal. Okay, so I'll be back in a minute. Let's just give the rotifers a chance to swim over to the light. Yeah, so this is pretty sad when you consider where we were just a few days ago with that halo of light coming down and there being so many rotifers in there. And now look at this. Like, we can see 4. We can literally count 4. That's so much fewer than before.
So much death. What to do against such reckless care? Ride out with me. Ride out with me and eat them. For death and glory. For rotifers. For your people.
So that's what happens when you don't split your rotifers in time. I might have been 2 days late on this. You know, the only thing you can hope is that this is full of rotifer eggs, which I think are called cysts. And then that the cyst will bloom when they end up in a tank that has lots of space and lots of food in it. So we'll see, but I don't know how that cycle works. Okay, so tough luck on that. We're going to go now look at the next tank. And I think the next logical one to look at is the original. So let's go look at original jar 1 Epsom salt container. So here we are looking at jar 1 original Epsom salt container. And we'll give it just a minute to let them swim to the light before we... Okay, and the original jar 1 Epsom salt container is another tragedy in the making. This has hardly been watered down at all since we split into the big green jar, and there, you know, once again, there's rotifers in here, but not many. I mean, they're alive and well. You can see them swimming around and swirling around, so they're okay. And I would say this is maybe 5 or 6 times the density that we're seeing in the coconut oil jars, so that's good. But once again, we're down 10 or 20, maybe even 100 times from the full density that this was at. So pretty tragic. I really let these sit too long. Now, all of our hopes ride on Big Greenie here. So I'll just zoom out for a second. It's that big that I have to zoom out. And we'll put the light on it. And we're going to let this sit for about a minute or 2 now. And I'll be back. And hopefully there's some good populations in here. It took them a long time to show up. We can't see them very well. But there are some in here. Not a lot, though. Not a lot at all. So Big Greenie is our best reservoir and has the most. But even Big Greenie, you can see it has some, and we're not able to get a good view of them. So it's probably a lot more than it looks like. But still not a booming population. For how much population we've lost here, I suspect that I have a contaminant of some kind. I forget what they're called. I want to say ciliates, but they're not ciliates. It's something else that are pests in rotifer cultures. Oh, and look at this. Look at our star. Look who turned out to be a star here. Oh, you guys can't see that. Here, now we can. So there's lots in this one for some strange reason, which is a super surprise because this one has been the most mistreated of all of them. Wow, how strange is that, eh? Maybe just because it's a small jar, it's easier to get an even distribution, or maybe just because it's glass,
we can actually see them, and so this one just looks better than all the others. If all the others actually have this kind of density, then we're cruising. Then we're fine. Then we got more than enough. I don't think so, though. I think I'm going to have to use this to inoculate the other ones. But we're going to let this ride for a while, and actually, I was going to kind of use this one as a throwaway one, but now this is actually my best culture, so I'm going to drip it up and fill it slowly, and hopefully use this one to refill the rest of them. Unless the other ones bounce back, because it seems to be an ebb and flow kind of thing. Though I bet if I was better at this, there would be less ebb and flow and more consistency. And if I split them every 3 days like I should, I bet we'd have much better performance as well. Okay, time to do a swap. Okay, let's start pulling this green water / white water out of the tank. From the opposite side that all the action is on. Okay, here goes nothing. Please work. Okay. That's probably 600 mils, 700 mils of water. Now we gotta check if there's anything alive in there. It's getting messier with each pull. I think I'm gonna stop here. So I only took out 2 liters. I wanted to take more, but I think I'm going to stop there. That's what my gut says. So that's where we'll stop. Okay. So, in that case, I can now check this one last time. Turn on the main light. Take this, dump it in here. That was a mistake. I should have dumped it up there. Okay. And then, now I'm going to go back over here. Take the light off. And we're going to dump this rotifer colony in. The whole thing. Not the whole thing. We're going to dump 80% of what remains, which will have been 90% of the entire culture. Here she goes. Goodbye, this stuff. Pouring it as slowly as possible because I'd like to keep the green stuff on the bottom. Like I said, I already checked the salinity of these and they're basically matching, which is why I can just kind of pour freely here. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. I kind of wanted to get more than that, but I think that's a good place to stop. So that'll do. Now, I probably should drip through there, but the truth is we don't want to contaminate my dripper anyway, so I'm just going to pour direct in. Like I said, they're pretty close in salinity, so it shouldn't be a crazy shot. But I'll do it in a couple cycles just to be nice. Oh. Now, I guess the really crazy part is this guy should get a bubbler too. This guy right here should get a bubbler too, but I don't have a plan to do that right now. Okay. There it is. There it is. So there's rotifers eating the whitewater, and I'm now feeding whitewater to the rotifers. And we're going to continue to just raise this one up, raise this one up, and raise this one up, all with fresh, clean salt water. And I'll have the opportunity to add fresh water to this one to bring the salinity down.